She was not a store. No sign on the porch, no cash register, and no receipt for anything. But she had a card table by the screen door, a freezer full of frozen Kool-Aid cups, and a jar of now and laters sorted by color. Every kid within 4 blocks knew her hours better than they knew their own class schedule. She was the candy lady, and the snacks she sold for a nickel, a dime, or a quarter shaped an entire generation of black childhoods in ways no grocery chain ever could. Number 17 on this list turned a bag of plain chips into something no restaurant has ever replicated. Number 7 never should have worked, and kids begged for it all summer long. Hit subscribe because this is going straight back to that front porch. Here are 25 snacks every black kid bought from the candy lady. Number 25, now and laters. The candy lady kept them loose in a jar, sorted by color, and you could buy a single piece for a penny. Grape, strawberry, cherry, watermelon, and a green apple flavor that could pull a loose tooth straight out of your head. The texture started hard, almost like taffy that had not decided what it wanted to be, and then the sugar broke down and the whole thing went soft and cemented itself to every surface inside your mouth. One piece lasted 20 minutes if you had discipline. Most kids did not. They bought 3, chewed them all at once, and came back an hour later with more coins. The candy companies still make them today, but nobody sells them one at a time anymore. That was what made the candy lady's jar different. She sold the experience 1 penny at a time. Number 24, freeze cups. A Dixie cup filled with Kool-Aid, mixed twice as strong as the packet called for, set in the freezer overnight, and sold the next afternoon for a dime. The recipe had 2 steps and no measurements. She poured until the cup was full and stirred until the color looked right. Red was the standard. Purple ran second. Nobody asked what flavor it was because the name on the packet did not matter. What mattered was the code. You ate it with a plastic spoon if she had one, and with your bottom teeth if she did not, scraping across the top in slow passes until your lips turned the same color as the ice. On a day when the pavement was soft enough to leave shoe prints, a freeze cup was the cheapest relief on the block. She kept them stacked in a chest freezer near the kitchen door, wrapped tight in foil, and she almost never ran out before dark. Number 23, blow pops. A lollipop with a wad of bubble gum sealed inside the center, and that combination alone made it a bargain. But what turned it into a candy lady staple was the time it bought you. One blow pop lasted longer than almost anything else on the table because no kid alive could resist working through the hard candy shell slowly, waiting for the gum to reveal itself. Grape and watermelon outsold everything else on the porch. Sour apple had a smaller, louder following. The trick was knowing when to bite down. Too early, and the gum came out, trapped in a mouthful of candy shards. Too late, and your tongue was raw from 30 minutes of sugar. Every kid on the block had a theory about the right moment. None of them had the patience to prove it. Number 22, pickles in a bag. A whole dill pickle dropped into a plastic sandwich bag with the brine still sloshing around, sold for a quarter. This was not candy in any shape the food industry would have recognized, but the candy lady sold it right next to the Jolly Ranchers, and nobody questioned the arrangement. The pickle was cold, sour, salty, and enormous for the price. You bit into it on the front step, and the juice ran down your wrist and left a stain on your shirt that your mother noticed the second you walked through the door. Some candy ladies sprinkled Kool-Aid powder into the bag for sweetness. Others shook in hot sauce. The plain version, just the dill and the brine, never needed a thing. It was already perfect the way it came out of the jar. Number 21, lemon heads. Sour on the outside, sweet underneath, and small enough to buy 5 at a time for a few pennies each. The Ferrara Candy Company has been making them since the early 1960s, and they have barely changed since. That was the whole appeal. Your mother bought them from a candy lady. Her mother probably did too. The sour coating hit your tongue like a jolt, sharp enough to make your eyes water if you ate two at once. Kids who could hold a lemon head in their mouth without flinching earned a quiet kind of respect on the block. The flavor was sharp, clean, and nothing like actual lemon. Nobody minded. It did what it was supposed to do. It woke your mouth up for a penny, and it left a sour tang on your lips that lasted longer than the walk home. Number 20, the penny candy mix. This was not one snack. This was a system. You walked in with a quarter and pointed at the jars, one by one. A root beer barrel, a watermelon slice, 2 butterscotch discs, a strawberry hard candy with the wrapper shaped like a strawberry. The candy lady counted out each pick and dropped them into a small paper bag, and if your math was wrong, she told you before you could point again. Some kids came in knowing exactly what they wanted. Others stood there for 5 minutes agonizing over the last 2 pennies. That folding table taught arithmetic faster than any classroom ever did because the stakes were real. Overshoot your budget and you walked home with less candy. The lesson landed and it stuck. The candy lady was never listed in any phone book. She never filed for a business license, and what she ran out of her living room would have violated health codes in every city in the country. Nobody reported her. Nobody would have considered it. She was usually an older woman, sometimes retired, sometimes raising grandchildren on a fixed income. The folding table by the front door was how she covered a light bill or put a few dollars of gas in the car. She bought the candy in bulk from the warehouse store, marked it up by a few cents a piece, and opened the door at 3 every afternoon. It was the smallest business model in the country, and it worked for one reason. No corner store within walking distance for half those kids. No vending machine at the park, no school snack bar that stayed open past 2 o'clock. She filled a gap that nobody else noticed and nobody else wanted to fill. Number 19, Chick-O sticks. If you never saw one, picture a candy bar made entirely of crunchy peanut butter and toasted coconut flakes pressed into a rough cylinder with no chocolate on it anywhere. The Atkinson Candy Company has been making them in Texas since the 1930s, and they have looked the same for the better part of a century. The orange and yellow wrapper stood out on every candy lady's table, and the price was always low enough that even the kid with the least money in his pocket could walk away with one. The taste had no real equivalent. The peanut butter was not smooth. It was dry, crumbly, slightly salty, and it fell apart the moment you bit into it. The coconut clung to your lips and your fingers and the front of your shirt. You ate a Chick-O stick and you looked like you lost a fight with a coconut cake. But the flavor sat in a spot between salty and sweet that most candy companies never figured out how to reach. No chocolate doing the heavy lifting, no caramel, no nougat, no cream filling holding it together, just peanut butter and coconut on their own. The Chick-O stick never had a television commercial, never landed a billboard or a celebrity on its wrapper. It survived on the quiet loyalty of candy ladies across the South who kept putting it on their tables because the kids kept reaching for it. The big chocolate bars moved faster on any given afternoon. They always did. But 20 years later, when someone asked what you used to buy from the woman on the next block, the Chick-O stick was the one that came back first. Most of the big candy brands from that era repackaged themselves twice and changed their recipes 3 times over. The Chick-O stick just stayed exactly the same. Number 18, atomic fireballs, a hard cinnamon ball the size of a marble that turned the inside of your mouth into a furnace. The Ferrara Pan Candy Company made them, and the candy lady sold them for a penny a piece. The real product was not the candy. The real product was the dare. Who could hold it on their tongue the longest without spitting it out? Who could chew through the hottest layer without water? Who could keep a straight face while their eyes filled up? Grown adults avoided them. Kids treated them like a competitive sport. The cinnamon oil in the coating was strong enough to make your lips tingle for an hour after. If you ate 3 in a row, your tongue went numb by supper time. The candy lady always had them because they were cheap to stock and impossible to ignore. Number 17, nachos, not the kind from a stadium or a movie theater. The candy lady version was a single serve bag of corn chips torn open along the side, topped with a scoop of hot cheese from a jar she kept warm on the stove, and sometimes a squirt of hot sauce or a scatter of pickled jalapenos. The whole thing cost 50 cents, maybe 75. It was the only hot food on the table, and it changed the math completely. You walked in for a blow pop, and you smelled that cheese warming up, and your quarter was not going to cut it anymore. The chips went soggy in about 4 minutes, which meant you ate fast and you did not share. There was nothing gourmet about it. A bag of chips, a ladle of processed cheese, and a paper plate underneath to catch the drip. No restaurant has ever come close. Number 16, candy cigarettes. A box of chalky white sugar sticks shaped like cigarettes, complete with a red tip painted on one end. You held them between your fingers and pretended to smoke, and the powdered sugar coating let you blow a small puff of white dust that looked close enough to real smoke to make you feel like somebody. The candy lady sold them without a second thought, and no parent in the neighborhood complained because half of them smoked real ones on the same porch where the kids were pretending. These faded out of most stores by the 1990s. Some companies renamed them candy sticks and dropped the red tip. The ones the candy lady sold still came in a box designed to look like a real cigarette pack, brand name and all. Number 15, Boston baked beans, not the kind from a can. These were peanuts coated in a hard candy shell, sold in a small cardboard box with a picture of a bean pot on the front. The name confused everyone who had never seen them before, and the candy lady never bothered explaining. You either knew what they were or you found out the hard way that they were peanuts, not beans. The candy shell cracked on the first bite, and the peanut inside was dry and roasted and slightly sweet. A box of them lasted exactly as long as it took to walk home, which was the right amount of time for a snack that cost almost nothing. The Ferrara Candy Company put them in a box that looked like it belonged in a pantry, not a candy store, and the name still confuses people who see it for the first time today. Number 14, wax bottles. They looked like tiny soda bottles, no taller than a thumb, molded from paraffin wax and filled with a few drops of colored syrup, so sweet it made your teeth ring. The candy lady kept them in a shallow box near the front of the table, usually 6 or 8 to a strip, and you bit the top off and tilted your head back to catch what was inside. The syrup lasted about 2 seconds. That was the whole experience. 2 seconds of liquid sugar and then a mouthful of wax that you chewed like gum until your jaw got tired or until somebody told you to spit it out. The real name on the package was Nick L. Nips, a brand that goes back over 100 years, and the name never made sense to anyone under the age of 40. Kids called them wax bottles or wax drinks or just those little bottles, and that was enough. The appeal was not the taste. The appeal was the ritual. Biting the top off was the event. The syrup was the reward. The wax was the aftermath. And every kid on that porch went through all 3 stages in the same order every single time. What made them a candy lady staple was the price. A strip of wax bottles cost almost nothing at wholesale, and she could sell them one at a time for a nickel or two at a time for a dime, and the margin was enormous. They took up almost no space. They did not melt. They did not go stale. They sat on that table in the heat all summer and never changed shape. For a woman running a business out of her kitchen with no refrigeration to spare, wax bottles were close to a perfect product. The syrup inside was never going to win a taste test against real juice or real soda, but that was beside the point. You were not buying flavor. You were buying the bite, the tilt, and the few seconds of something cold and sweet landing on your tongue before the wax took over. Quarters and dimes do not sound like much. A penny for a now and later, dime for a freeze cup, a quarter for a pickle, but those coins added up, and for the woman behind that table, they added up to something real. A candy lady who sold 50 freeze cups a day at a dime each cleared $5 before sundown, and $5 covered a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, and a pack of ground meat in the years when that mattered most. She was not getting rich. She was making the math work one coin at a time in a neighborhood where the nearest store charged more for less and closed before dinner. The children who stood at that table spending their coins were participating in a local economy that no bank tracked, no tax form recorded, and no city council ever acknowledged. It ran on trust, on exact change, and on the fact that every kid on the block knew the rules. Number 13, honey buns, the full-size ones, not the minis. A spiral of sweet dough glazed in a sugar coating thick enough to leave your fingers tacky for an hour, wrapped in plastic and sold for 50 cents or less. A honey bun was not a snack. A honey bun was a meal disguised as a dessert. It was big enough to fill you up after school, sweet enough to make you forget that you had not eaten lunch, and cheap enough that it made everything else on the table look like a luxury purchase. Some candy ladies kept them by the register at room temperature. Others warmed them up in the microwave, which turned the glaze into a thin layer of liquid sugar that coated your entire mouth. The warm ones cost a little more. They were worth every cent. Number 12, Jolly Ranchers. Watermelon versus green apple was the argument that never ended on that porch. Both sides were loud, both sides were certain, and neither side ever changed a single mind. The candy lady sold them individually, unwrapped from the big bag, and you could buy one for a penny or two. A Jolly Rancher lasted longer than most hard candies because the sugar was dense enough to resist your teeth. You sucked on it until it turned into a thin, sharp disc that could cut the inside of your cheek if you were not careful. Blue raspberry had its loyalists. Cherry was reliable, but watermelon and green apple owned that table, and the debate outlasted the candy lady herself. People who have not eaten a Jolly Rancher in 30 years can still tell you which flavor they picked, and they will still argue about it. Number 11, Laffy Taffy, the banana flavor. That is the one people remember, and it was always the first to sell out. The candy came in a flat wrapper with a joke printed on the back, and the joke was never funny, but you read it anyway because you were 10 years old and you had just spent a nickel on a piece of taffy, and the joke was included in the price. The banana version had a flavor that tasted like nothing in nature and everything you wanted. Other flavors existed: strawberry, grape, green apple. They sat in the jar longer. Banana moved the moment it showed up. The wrapper stuck to itself if it got warm, and the taffy pulled your fillings if you chewed too fast. But you kept buying it because the banana Laffy Taffy was one of those flavors that stayed in your head long after the candy was gone. Number 10, moon pies. 2 round graham cracker wafers with a marshmallow filling pressed between them. The whole thing dipped in a chocolate shell that cracked the second you bit through it. The Chattanooga Bakery in Tennessee has been making them since 1917, and they were built for coal miners and mill workers who needed something cheap, filling, and tough enough to survive a lunch pail. That same durability made them a candy lady fixture. They were bigger than your hand, cost less than a chocolate bar, and held their shape on a hot porch all afternoon. The chocolate version was the default. Banana and vanilla existed, but always trailed behind. A moon pie and an RC cola was a pairing so common across the South it had its own reputation, and a kid holding both on the candy lady's front steps had a complete afternoon for loose change. They never pretended to be fine candy. They did not need to be. Number 9, sunflower seeds. A bag of David brand seeds, salted or ranch flavored, sold for a quarter. Eating sunflower seeds was a skill, and the porch was where you learned it. You cracked the shell with your teeth, worked the seed out with your tongue, and spit the husk into a growing pile on the step. Kids who could do it without looking were showing off. Kids who swallowed the shells whole were amateurs, and everyone let them know it. A bag lasted an hour if you paced yourself, which made it one of the best time per penny values on the table. The salt dried your lips out by the bottom of the bag, but by then you were already committed. The pile of empty shells on the porch step told the candy lady exactly how long you'd been sitting there, and she never said a word about it. Number 8, pixie sticks, a paper straw filled with flavored sugar. That was it. There was no candy shell, no gum inside, no chocolate coating, just sugar, citric acid, and artificial color packed into a tube that you tore open and poured directly into your mouth. Parents hated them. Dentists would have picketed the candy lady's porch if they had known. Kids worshiped them because the pixie sticks delivered the purest, most efficient sugar hit of any item on the table. The giant ones, the ones as long as your forearm, were a special occasion purchase. The small ones cost a penny. You could empty one in 2 seconds and feel the sugar crystals dissolving on your tongue before you finished blinking. There was no pretense to a pixie sticks. It was sugar, and it knew it was sugar, and so did you. Number 7, Kool-Aid pickles. Take a jar of whole dill pickles, drain half the brine, pour in an entire packet of cherry or tropical punch Kool-Aid powder and a cup of sugar. Screw the lid back on and let it sit in the refrigerator for a week. When the pickle comes out, it is bright red or electric blue, soaked through with sweetness, and it looks like it belongs in a science experiment, not on a plate. This is a real tradition that has been documented across the Mississippi Delta for decades. The combination should not work. Sour brine and sweet Kool-Aid powder have no business being in the same jar. But something happens during that week in the refrigerator. The sugar cuts the sharpness of the vinegar. The Kool-Aid flavor seeps into the flesh of the cucumber. And what you end up with is a pickle that tastes sweet and sour and cold and salty all at the same time, in a way that no other snack on the table comes close to matching. Candy ladies who sold Kool-Aid pickles charged more for them, usually 50 cents or 75, because the prep time was longer and the ingredients cost more than just dropping a dill pickle into a bag. Kids saved up for them. They planned their trips around the days the pickles were ready. The color alone was enough to sell them, because a bright red pickle in a bag is the kind of thing you have to try at least once, and once was never enough. They never showed up in any grocery store. They never got a brand name or a barcode. They survived on front porches and in church parking lots and at family reunions across the South, and they are still being made today by people who learned the recipe from someone who learned it from someone else. Number 6, wrap snacks, chip bags with rappers and hip-hop artists on the front, each one tied to a different flavor. The brand started in the 1990s, and it was one of the only snack companies in the country that marketed directly to black neighborhoods with faces and names the kids actually recognized. The candy lady stocked them because they sold themselves. A kid who walked past a regular bag of potato chips would stop dead in front of a bag with a familiar face on it. The flavors leaned heavy on seasoning. Barb B. Quinn, with my honey, sour cream, with a dab of ranch. The names were part of the product. Rap Snacks understood something the bigger chip companies did not. The packaging was the advertising, and the audience was standing right there at the table. Number 5, hot fries. The red bag with Andy Cap's face on the front, leaning against the lamppost like he had nowhere to be. Inside were short, crunchy sticks coated in cayenne seasoning that hit the back of your throat before you finished the first handful. The candy lady sold them in single bags, and they were one of the few snacks on her table that made you reach for a drink before you reached for another bite. The heat was not subtle. It sat on your lips and stayed there, and the red dust transferred to your fingers, your shirt, and whatever you touched next. A kid walking home with hot fries, residue on both hands, was advertising where he had been without saying a word. They cost almost nothing. They were loud in every sense, and they never needed refrigeration. For a quarter, you got a bag of fire that lasted the whole walk home, and by the time you got to your front door, your fingertips were still burning. Number 4, Mary Jane's, a small flat candy made of molasses and peanut butter, wrapped in yellow wax paper with a picture of a girl on the front. These were old. They were already old when the candy lady started selling them. The molasses made them dark and chewy and slightly bitter in a way that separated them from every other candy on the table. Kids either loved them or quietly put them back. There was no middle ground with the Mary Jane. The peanut butter flavor came through second after the molasses landed, and together they created a taste that belonged to another era entirely. They stuck to your teeth with a grip that nothing short of a toothbrush could break. The candy lady always had them, and they always sat in the jar longer than the brighter, louder candy next to them. But the kids who reached for a Mary Jane were the ones who grew up eating them, and they never switched. Number 3, Alexander the Grape, a small, hard, grape-flavored candy in a purple wrapper made by the Ferrara Candy Company. The name was the whole marketing strategy. Alexander the Grape. It made you smile the first time you heard it, and it made you reach for the jar because the wordplay stuck in your head. The grape flavor was strong and artificial in the best possible way, closer to grape soda than to any actual grape. The candy was dense enough to last a long time in your mouth, and it had a slight chew once the outer shell dissolved. Most stores stopped carrying them years ago. They show up now and then in retro candy shops and online orders, but the version that sat in a jar on the candy lady's table belongs to a specific time and place that moved on without it. Number 2, Quarter Waters, a plastic barrel-shaped bottle filled with bright-colored juice drink, sealed with a foil top that you peel back or bit through. They cost exactly what the name said, a quarter. The flavors were fruit punch, grape, orange, and a blue one that nobody could identify but everybody drank anyway. The juice inside was mostly water, sugar, and artificial color, and it was ice cold because the candy lady kept them in the back of the refrigerator where the temperature dropped the lowest. You drank the whole thing in under a minute, crushed the barrel in your fist, and threw it away. It was not juice, and it was not soda, and it was not water. It was a quarter water. It was its own category, invented by Price and sold by the millions in neighborhoods where a quarter was the exact right amount for something cold and sweet on a hot afternoon. Number 1, the free one. You walked up to the table with 4 cents when the thing you wanted cost a nickel, and she looked at you, and she gave it to you anyway. No lecture, no tab, no next time, bring the right amount. She just handed it over because you were a child standing on her porch with not quite enough money, and she was a woman who understood what that felt like. Every candy lady had a version of this. The kid who was a penny short. The kid who showed up after school with nothing at all, and she slid a freeze cup across the table without a word. The snack itself did not matter. What mattered was the gesture, and what the gesture taught every child on that block about what generosity looks like when it comes from someone who does not have much to spare. That was never about the candy. That was about a woman in a neighborhood behind a folding table deciding that a child on her porch was worth more than a nickel.
Buttermilk cornbread sticks brought the smell of hot iron and sweet corn to countless African-American kitchens, where cast iron molds shaped each piece into crisp-edged fingers perfect for dipping. The batter of stone-ground cornmeal, tangy buttermilk, and a little lard was poured into sizzling molds so the edges crackled as soon as they touched the heat. Children loved pulling the golden sticks apart, steam rising as they slathered honey butter across the ridges. They were the ideal companion to collard greens or a simple bowl of beans, hearty enough to stand alone as a snack when money was scarce. Street vendors sold them wrapped in newspaper at church homecomings, and neighbors traded secrets about which cornmeal gave the best crunch. The sound of batter meeting hot iron became a music of its own, echoing through small kitchens on quiet evenings. Today, these molds often sit forgotten in cupboards, but a warm cornbread stick still delivers a taste of the past that is both humble and magnificent.
Parched. Peanuts required nothing but raw peanuts, a cast iron skillet, and patience, which is why every grandmother made them differently. Some roasted them in the shell, shaking the pan every few minutes until the shells darkened and the kitchen filled with a warm, earthy scent that clung to the curtains. Others shelled them first, stirring the raw nuts dry with a pinch of salt until they turned golden and the oil released. The technique traces to West Africa, where groundnuts were roasted over open fire long before reaching the American South through the slave trade. By the 1950s, parched peanuts were common in Black households across Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, where peanut farming shaped local economies for generations. George Washington, Carver's work at Tuskegee, had elevated the peanut from livestock feed to kitchen staple decades earlier. You ate them warm, handful by handful, and the ones at the bottom of the bowl, the most roasted, the darkest, those were always the best.
Tea time. Lemon chess squares carried the tang of fresh citrus into parlors where neighbors gathered for quiet afternoon visits. Based on the old-fashioned chess pie, these bars combined tart lemon juice with sugar, eggs, and a touch of cornmeal to create a dense, custardy filling. Poured over a simple shortbread crust and baked until golden, the squares were sliced neatly and dusted with a whisper of powdered sugar if it could be spared. Their bright flavor cut through the heaviness of traditional sweets, offering a refreshing note that matched the clink of teacups and the soft murmur of conversation. Hostesses prized the recipe because it kept well at room temperature and could be prepared a day ahead, making it perfect for church socials and family reunions. Children who tasted them for the first time often asked for seconds, surprised by the burst of sunshine flavor. Though rarely baked now, these squares remain a symbol of hospitality and quiet elegance, a reminder that a little lemon and patience could turn humble ingredients into something unforgettable.
Before lunch, money was a guarantee. Syrup sandwiches filled the gap between hunger and the next real meal. 2 slices of white bread, a heavy pour of Cairo syrup or dark cane syrup, pressed together and wrapped in wax paper for school. The bread went soft and sticky within minutes, part of the appeal for little hands that liked pulling it apart in sweet, doughy strings. In the 1950s, a bottle of Cairo cost less than 20 cents and stretched across a week of snacks for 3 or 4 kids. Dark syrup carried a caramel note with a faint bitterness that balanced the sweetness. Light was milder, preferred by the younger ones. No one bragged about eating syrup sandwiches. It was the kind of snack made quietly on afternoons when the icebox held nothing else. But decades later, grown men and women speak of it with something close to reverence because that sandwich meant somebody made sure you didn't go without. Cornmeal fried cakes did not come from a recipe book. They came from watching, standing close enough to feel the heat while someone older stirred cornmeal into sweetened batter and dropped it by the handful into smoking lard. You poured until the batter looked right, cracked the egg without counting, added sugar until you tasted it off your fingertip. These were the original donuts of rural black kitchens. No yeast, no rising time, no special pan. The cakes fried up with a gritty golden crust and a tender center that tasted like cornbread, and cake agreed on something sweet. Across the Mississippi Delta, cornmeal never ran out, making these the dessert that survived every lean month and every empty shelf. The women who fried them could finish a dozen without burning one, hands steady in the smoke.
Hot water. Cornbread fritters were the quick answer to hunger when a hearty snack was needed before supper or after school. Cooks stirred boiling water into seasoned cornmeal, forming a thick dough that could be shaped into small patties with a spoon. Dropped into a skillet of hot bacon drippings, the fritters sizzled and browned within minutes, filling the room with a toasty aroma that made waiting difficult. The crust formed a crisp shell while the inside stayed tender and warm. Children often burned their fingers snatching them from the pan before they cooled, eager to taste the smoky corn flavor. These fritters paired perfectly with a drizzle of cane syrup or a slice of fresh tomato when gardens were plentiful. They proved that simple ingredients and a hot stove could create pure comfort faster than any fancy recipe. Today, the memory of that first crunchy bite still lives wherever people remember the sound of cornmeal meeting hot iron.
Long before snacks came in plastic wrappers, they came from the same pot that fed the family. Crackling bread was born on hog killing day when families rendered lard from pork fat, and the crispy bits left behind, cracklings, were folded straight into cornbread batter. The cracklings gave the bread a crunch plain cornbread never had, little pockets of salt and pork fat that burst between your teeth. This wasn't something learned from a book. You stood next to whoever worked the stove, watching her crumble the cracklings with her fingers, judging the batter's thickness by sight. Through the 1940s and 50s in the rural South, hog killing meant every part of the animal fed somebody, and crackling bread was how the smallest scraps ended up on the table tasting richer than anything store-bought. Kids tore off corners still warm from the cast iron, eating it plain or crumbled into potlikker. The bread kept for days, growing denser with each one. Fried peach hand pies were the kind of dessert you smelled before you saw the plate. Dried peaches simmered to a thick, sweet pulp, spooned onto rounds of biscuit dough, folded shut, and slid into a cast iron skillet of hot lard. In North Carolina, folks called them peach jacks, and the name alone could start a family argument. The secret was always dried fruit, never fresh. Families hung peach slices on strings in late summer until they shriveled into chewy ribbons of concentrated sweetness. You knew the oil was right by the sound, a sharp crackle the instant the edge hit the surface. Black cooks across Georgia and the Carolinas wrapped these in wax paper for field workers and packed them into baskets for church homecomings. They traveled north during the Great Migration, tucked into suitcases for long train rides. You can find versions at gas stations now, but they carry none of the warmth. The ones she fried with peaches she dried herself and dough she mixed by feel. Those disappeared the morning she stopped getting up early enough to make them.
Sweet potato tea cakes were once the pride of community bake sales and Sunday socials, a simple cookie that carried the fragrance of home in every bite. Mashed sweet potato gave the dough a gentle orange hue and natural sweetness, while molasses and warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg filled kitchens with an autumn scent no matter the season. Grandmothers stirred the batter with wooden spoons worn smooth from years of use, passing quiet wisdom to the children who helped scoop each round onto greased pans. The cakes baked into soft, slightly chewy circles that could be eaten plain or brushed with a thin sugar glaze if the family had a little extra. Churchgoers wrapped them in brown paper to sell for mission fundraisers, and travelers carried a few in coat pockets for long train rides when cafe prices were too high. Today, their memory lingers mostly in handwritten recipe cards tucked inside family Bibles. Tasting one now would be like opening a window to the warmth of a kitchen filled with laughter, hymn humming, and the sweet comfort of community spirit.
Cinnamon sugar toast was the first snack most black kids learned to make alone, standing on a chair to reach the counter. The bread had to be white and soft enough to hold the butter without tearing. You spread it thick all the way to the edges because bare corners were unacceptable. Then came the cinnamon and sugar from a jar that lived next to the stove, the ratio known only to whoever filled it. The toast went under the broiler, never in a toaster, and you watched through the oven door until the sugar bubbled and the edges turned dark gold. You ate it standing up, burning your fingers, licking the grit off your thumb. It cost pennies, took 3 minutes, and the smell alone could pull every kid in the house out of hiding. Nobody sells it, nobody orders it, but that smell takes you straight back to a kitchen where the oven was always warm. When bananas turned black on the counter, too soft for slicing, too sweet for anything sensible, that was exactly when they became perfect. Fried banana fritters took overripe fruit and turned it into something golden, crisp, and impossibly rich. Mashed into batter with flour, a beaten egg, sugar, and cinnamon, then dropped in rounds into hot lard. The natural sugars caramelized against the oil, creating edges that crackled into the warm center. Caribbean influence ran deep. Plantain fritter versions existed across the islands, and as families from Jamaica and Trinidad settled in southern port cities during the 1940s and 50s, those recipes merged with African American frying traditions already old. Some cooks added vanilla. Others drizzled brown sugar dissolved in butter over the top. The whole thing cost almost nothing and used fruit headed for the trash, resourceful and indulgent in the same bite.
Peanut brittle with sorghum was the kind of candy that snapped between your teeth and stuck in your memory long after the last piece was gone. Farm families boiled sorghum syrup until it bubbled thick and dark, its grassy sweetness richer than plain sugar. Roasted peanuts were stirred in quickly, the hot mixture poured across buttered pans and spread thin with the back of a spoon. Children waited wide-eyed as the candy cooled, eager to crack off shiny amber shards that caught the light like stained glass. Revival gatherings and county fairs always had a table piled high with these sweet, brittle sheets, often wrapped in wax paper tied with string. The sorghum not only gave a deeper flavor, but also reflected the ingenuity of cooks who relied on what they could grow rather than expensive, refined sugar. Each bite carried the flavor of late summer fields and long evenings under oil lamps. To taste it again would be to remember the easy companionship of neighbors sharing stories while the brittle snapped between happy hands.
Frozen Kool-Aid cups turned a 5-cent packet of drink mix into a summer business that kept entire blocks buzzing. Every neighborhood had a house where somebody's mama filled Dixie cups with Kool-Aid, stuck in popsicle sticks, and sold them off the porch for a dime. Cherry was the best seller, grape ran second, tropical punch was for the bold. You mixed it stronger than the packet said, doubled the sugar, poured slow so the stick stayed centered while the cups froze overnight. By noon, kids lined up on the sidewalk with coins earned sweeping porches or returning bottles. The trick was peeling the cup without breaking the ice. Squeeze just right, let the edges give, pull the paper down in one strip. Some bit straight through, others licked slow, letting the color stain their lips purple for hours. It was a childhood economy built on sugar, ice, and 5-cent packets, and every kid on the block knew exactly which house had the coldest cups. If those peach pies belonged to summer, fried apple turnovers owned the fall. The apples were always dried, never fresh. Dried fruit concentrated the flavor into something candy-like and held together without turning to mush. Families sliced their own from backyard trees each September, stringing them above the wood stove to cure. The dough was simple: flour, lard, salt, cold water, rolled thin and cut with the rim of a coffee cup. A spoonful of stewed apples in the center, edges crimped with a fork, and the whole thing slid into lard so hot it sealed the crust on contact. You never pierced the dough before frying. A single hole meant the filling leaked and the oil went dark. Kids learned that rule before they learned to read. These traveled in coat pockets to school, in baskets to church, in paper sacks to funerals.
Pickled watermelon rind chips turned what many considered scraps into a chewy, sweet tart treat that brightened long summer afternoons. After the red flesh was eaten, thrifty cooks peeled the green skin and cut the pale rind into thin strips. These were simmered in a syrup of vinegar, sugar, and spices until translucent, then laid out to dry slightly for a texture somewhere between fruit leather and candied peel. The result was a snack both refreshing and delightfully surprising, a clever way to honor every part of the harvest. Children carried jars of the glossy slices to picnics, where their tangy bite cut through the heat. Neighbors traded jars as gifts, each household claiming its own secret spice blend. The chips lasted for weeks in a cool pantry, offering a taste of summer long after the first frost. Today, they remain a testament to creativity and respect for the land, proof that nothing in a watermelon need ever be wasted.
Cornbread crumbled into a tall glass of cold buttermilk separated insiders from everybody else. If you knew, no explanation was needed. If you didn't, none would be enough. The cornbread had to be day-old, fresh, dissolved into mush instead of holding its crumble. You broke it into chunks, dropped them into the glass, poured cold buttermilk over the top, and ate it with a long spoon, chasing soaked pieces to the bottom. The tang of buttermilk against the grit of cornmeal was savory, sour, and oddly refreshing in the deep South heat. Some added a pinch of salt, others crumbled raw onion into the glass, which sounds wrong until you've tried it. Through the 1940s and 60s, this was an after-work snack for laborers and a between meals holdover for kids who couldn't wait for supper. It used yesterday's bread, needed no cooking, and the buttermilk was already in the icebox from that morning.
Spiced pecan pralines once lined church fundraising tables and family picnic baskets with their glossy sweetness and gentle crunch. Whole pecans were toasted until fragrant, then coated in a bubbling mixture of brown sugar, butter, and warm spices like cinnamon and clove. The candy cooled into soft clusters that broke apart with a satisfying snap, each bite a perfect balance of nutty richness and spiced caramel. Volunteers wrapped the pralines in wax paper or tucked them into small paper bags, selling them to raise money for community projects or simply to share a taste of love. Children waited eagerly for the last bits left to harden on the pan, scraping every sticky corner. Their aroma filled kitchens long after the candy was gone, a scent of celebration and togetherness. Today, store-bought sweets rarely capture that handmade charm, but the memory of spiced pecan pralines still carries the warmth of fellowship and the pride of a well-kept family recipe.
She never called it a recipe. Soft white bread, a thick spread of butter, and a generous shake of sugar pressed into the surface so it wouldn't fall off. That first bite was pure sweetness cut by the salt in the butter, the bread compressing under your teeth into something almost like cake. Across the 1950s and 60s, This was what mothers made when kids came in starving and dinner was still an hour away. No cooking, no planning, nothing that wasn't already on the counter. Some mothers sprinkled lightly, others buried the bread under a snowdrift of crystals that crunched with each bite. It was never served at gatherings, never mentioned proudly. But ask any Black adult from that era and watch their face change. The memory isn't about the food, it's about hands moving fast between the counter and the table, making sure you had something sweet before the world asked anything else of you.
Molasses pull candy turned an ordinary evening into a celebration of sticky fun and family patience. Thick molasses was boiled until it reached a glossy stage, then poured onto buttered pans to cool just enough for handling. Children and adults buttered their hands and began the long, rhythmic process of pulling and folding the warm candy until it turned a light golden color and grew chewy. The sweet strands stretched like ribbons, twisting into shapes that hardened into bite-sized treats once cooled. Autumn was the favorite season for this ritual, when cool air helped the candy set and neighbors gathered for the show. The smell of molasses clung to clothing and hair, a sugary perfume that marked a good night well spent. Every piece carried a hint of smoke from the kettle and a memory of shared laughter. Modern kitchens rarely see such slow, hands-on candy making, but those who remember know the pull of tradition is as strong as the candy itself.
Peanut butter and jelly on saltine crackers was what happened when the bread ran out, but hunger didn't. You spread peanut butter on one cracker, grape jelly on the other, pressed them together, and hoped it held. It rarely did. The saltine snapped under the weight, and you'd eat the whole thing in pieces, licking your fingers between bites. But the salt cut through the sweet jelly in a way soft bread never managed. In the 1960s, a box of saltines cost 15 cents and peanut butter ran about a quarter, making this one of the cheapest protein snacks a mother could stock. Kids ate these after school, before dinner, and sometimes instead of dinner when weeks ran long. Crackers stayed crisp for weeks. Peanut butter didn't need the icebox, and the jelly lasted until the jar was scraped clean with a spoon. 25 snacks from a folding table in a living room, and not one of them needed a commercial to sell. The candy lady never franchised. She never applied for a permit or filed a quarterly tax return. She opened the screen door at 3 o'clock and let the neighborhood do the rest. If you grew up counting coins on the walkover, drop the name of your candy lady in the comments. Some of those women fed a whole block on quarters and goodwill, and they deserve to be remembered out loud. Share this with someone who still remembers what a freeze cup tastes like.